Hello, welcome to Tyler Tech Tips. On this episode, we're testing file transfer times. And on this episode, the things we are testing. Now, mostly I did this video for fun. I just wanted to see a comparison. Now, note that I'm using older hardware like an 8350 AMD. So basically, take this as more of a comparative, like compare the results against each other rather than take this as it's on all systems. So here we go. Watch the montage. What a beautiful montage that was. Editor me, keep at it. Anyway, the results are pretty expected. There might have been a few surprises, such as USB to USB. I thought that would have been a bit faster, but it was the slowest of them all. And obviously RAM disk to RAM disk was the fastest. Now, the most helpful information is probably USB to SSD than SSD to USB. Now, USB to SSD was quite a bit faster than SSD to USB. However, probably to be expected, some caching issues. Maybe you fill up the cache first or whatever. I don't know what's going on there. Probably just differences in read and write speeds. However, RAM disks present a very interesting idea, whether or not you should work with RAM disks, and this question has been floated many times. And if you have the space for it, and you need to store things quickly, such as cache files, yeah, it's going to be fast. But will it make a difference? Probably not with small write and reads. But for large file sizes, it certainly does help. But this isn't always the case, such as RAM to USB was the second slowest, despite something like SSD to RAM, which was the second fastest. So you're going to have to deal with the protocols between your devices, such as, well, of course, RAM is very quick, so CPU to RAM is fast, but CPU to USB versus CPU to SSD, well, those are using different protocols. So you're going from solid state across the PCI bus up to your RAM. Now that's very quickly. However, when you go into things like USB, you have to realize that they're not as quick as the traces on your motherboard, which is a lot faster. So we have to take that into consideration from when we are deciding what files we want to transfer from where. As I said, the best was RAM to RAM. However, the most practical information is probably USB to SSD and SSD to USB. Now, writing from the USB to an SSD only took about 1 minute 30 seconds, whereas the SSD to USB took about 3 minutes 30 seconds. So read and write speeds are definitely different and should be taken into consideration. Now, the file we transferred, if you missed it, was about just 3.8 gigs, an AVI video file. Now, the reason why I didn't test a lot of little files is because, well, they would have gone by so fast, and I wouldn't have been able to observe the actual speed that they were going at. And we really don't have to worry about these little files because they're, as I said, little and they transfer really fast. So there really isn't any point in testing them. This is mostly for people who need to work with large files, just to have some idea of what it is you're dealing with. So if you're a video production guy and you want the best place to transfer files quickly, I would suggest doing I would always suggest SSD storage first. RAM disks, if you lose power, your RAM disks and anything on it is going to go by. Probably the best bet is to do like a separate two RAID 0 SSDs to just transfer things quickly as you scrub through them. However, if you have confidence in your power and you only working with files that you need to scrub to, let's say you store your files on a hard drive or an SSD and then make a copy of them to your RAM disks, and then you save your project files to a different place. So the only thing in the volatile memory is the large files themselves. This way, if you do lose power, you can just reinitialize the RAM disk and then recopy over those things, and you lost nothing in your project file. That could be a solution as well, and probably a more common one for a lot of people. If you don't want to store your video, but practically speaking, it'll only work if your video files are quite small. Video files that you probably will be working with being gigabytes in size. So unless you have like 128 gigs of RAM, this might not really be practical. And then doing the SSD to SSD kind of transfers would be the best. So having a separate SSD to store your stuff, and then project files on one and then the cache files on the other, that would be a beautiful setup for Adobe Premiere. Now, there really isn't much else we can pull from these results. I have them up on the screen right now. You can look at them as you will, but this was basically just an experiment for me to do because I wanted to do it, and I figured I'd record it and show you guys the results. And well, see you next time. Thank you for watching. Hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and see you in the next episode. Bye for now.